The sealed envelope trembled in Julian Sterling's hand as he stood on Elena's porch. His steel-gray eyes locked on hers. 99.9% match. Is mine, Elena. Just as I always suspected. The words hung between them like a death sentence as the coastal wind whipped around the small cottage where she'd been hiding for over a year. Have you ever had your entire world threatened by someone who once promised to love you forever? Someone who chose pride over truth and power over compassion? When billionaire CEO Julian Sterling discovered his fiancée in another man's arms, he vowed to take their child and ensure she'd never see him again. But what if the betrayal wasn't what it seemed? What if the truth had been manipulated by someone with a dangerous obsession? What would you do if the man who broke your heart and threatened to take your child suddenly appeared on your doorstep with the power to destroy everything you've built? Hey, my queens, when life brings a storm that threatens to drown everything you've built, remember this. Your truth doesn't need anyone's permission to exist. Some of us have faced men who wielded their power like weapons, who made us doubt our own reality because their pride couldn't bear the weight of trust. But here's what I know for certain. A woman who stands firmly in her truth, even when the whole world doubts her, carries a strength that no fortune or influence can match. The courage to protect what matters most, to rebuild from ashes, to hold your ground when everything is at stake. That's the legacy of resilience we pass down through generations of sisters. Your story may be questioned, but your worth never should be. The morning fog clung to the weathered, clapboard houses of Seabrook like a reluctant lover. Elena Vance stood at her kitchen window, watching the mist swirl around the lighthouse in the distance, while her son Oliver slept peacefully in his crib. At 13 months old, he was the spitting image of his father, same stormy gray eyes, same determined set of his jaw even in sleep. The resemblance was both a blessing and a curse. A daily reminder of everything she'd lost and everything she'd fought to protect. The soft ping of her phone broke the silence. A text from Maggie, her neighbor and the closest thing to family she had in this coastal hideaway. Black sedan with tinted windows just pulled up at the harbor shops. Man in suit asking directions to your address. Elena's hands trembled as she set down her coffee mug. After 22 months of careful anonymity, of building a life where no one knew her past, of nights spent looking over her shoulder, he had found her. Julian Sterling had come to collect what he believed was his. She moved to Oliver's room with quiet urgency, her heart hammering against her ribs. The baby slept on, one tiny fist curled against his cheek, unaware that his world was about to change forever. Elena brushed a gentle finger across his dark curls, memorizing every detail of his perfect face. I promised I'd protect you, she whispered. And I will. The crunch of tires on gravel outside her cottage sent ice through her veins. Elena straightened her shoulders and moved to the front door. If Julian Sterling wanted a fight, he would find she was no longer the same woman who had fled Manhattan in tears 22 months ago. That woman had been broken. This one had been forged in fire. Julian Sterling stepped out of the black Bentley, his tall frame unfolding with the precise, controlled movements that had become his trademark in boardrooms across the globe. At 38, he was at the pinnacle of his power. Sterling Innovations had just crossed the $10 billion valuation mark. His face had graced the cover of Forbes twice in the past year, and his reputation as a brilliant but merciless businessman had grown to near mythic proportions. Yet as he stood before the small white cottage with its blue shutters and wild garden of coastal flowers, he felt none of that power. Instead, a strange hollowness expanded in his chest, the same emptiness that had haunted him for months. Wait in the car, he instructed his driver and the stone-faced attorney who had accompanied him. This is private. The attorney, a shark in an expensive suit who specialized in high-profile custody battles, frowned. Mr. Sterling, I strongly advise against speaking to Ms. Vance without representation present. Given the circumstances. I said wait. Julian's voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. He approached the cottage alone, noting the wind chimes dancing in the salt breeze, the carefully tended herb garden, the small tricycle on the porch. Signs of a peaceful life. A life he was about to disrupt with all the force of a hurricane. Before he could knock, the door swung open. Elena stood in the doorway, her copper hair caught in the morning light, her green eyes clear and unflinching. She wore simple jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out flecks of turquoise in her irises. She looked both exactly the same and completely different from the woman who had disappeared from his penthouse that rainy November night. Julian. His name on her lips carried no emotion, neither fear nor anger, just acknowledgement. Elena. He found himself momentarily at a loss for words, the carefully rehearsed speech evaporating from his mind. She didn't invite him in. Instead, she stepped onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Does it matter?" He studied her face, searching for what? Guilt? Defiance? The woman before him showed neither, just a quiet resolve that was new to him. "I suppose not." She crossed her arms. "You're here for the DNA test." It wasn't a question. They both knew why he had come, what he had promised or threatened that night. "Yes." Julian reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope. "I've arranged for a private lab. Discreet, reputable. The results will be available within hours." Elena took the envelope without opening it. "And then what, Julian? If he's yours, which we both know he is, what happens next? You take my son? You punish me for a betrayal that never happened." The bitterness in her voice was the first crack in her composed facade, and it stirred something uncomfortable in Julian's chest. "I have a right to know my child," he said, his voice harder than he intended. "A right?" Elena's laugh held no humor. "Rights are for people who show up, Julian. For people who listen when someone they claim to love begs them to believe her. For people who don't threaten to use their power and wealth to rip a child from his mother's arms." Julian's jaw tightened. "You disappeared. You took my child and vanished. I protected my child from a man who made it very clear he would use every resource at his disposal to take him from me." Her eyes flashed. "What choice did I have?" Before Julian could respond, a soft cry came from inside the cottage. Elena's entire demeanor changed in an instant, her focus shifting completely from the confrontation to the sound of her child. "Wait here," she said, disappearing inside. Julian stood on the porch, listening to the gentle murmurs as Elena comforted the baby. His baby, if what she had always claimed was true. The sound of her voice, soft and loving, stirred memories he had spent months trying to bury. Elena laughing in the kitchen of his penthouse as she attempted to teach him to make pasta from scratch. Elena curled against him on lazy Sunday mornings, her hair spread across his chest. Elena's eyes, bright with tears of joy, when he had knelt before her with a ring that had taken 3 jewelers to perfect. Before everything had shattered, the door opened again, and Elena emerged with a child in her arms. Julian's breath caught in his throat. The boy was beautiful, dark curls framing a face that was hauntingly familiar. Julian found himself staring into a miniature version of his own eyes, the same eyes that had gazed back at him from childhood photographs in his mother's albums. "This is Oliver," Elena said quietly. "Oliver, this is Mr. Sterling." The formality stung more than Julian had expected. The child regarded him solemnly, one small hand clutching his mother's sweater. "He has your eyes," Elena said, the words carrying a weight of unspoken meaning. "He always had your eyes. I told you the truth from the beginning." Julian swallowed hard, unprepared for the surge of emotion that swept through him at the sight of his son. "May I?" He gestured vaguely, uncertain how to ask permission to touch his own child. Elena hesitated, then nodded once. She didn't hand Oliver over but shifted him slightly so Julian could see him better. Julian reached out slowly, offering his finger to the boy. Oliver studied it with serious concentration before reaching out to grasp it with surprising strength. "Hello, Oliver," Julian said softly. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them, a subtle change that neither could quite name. For a moment, they were just 3 people on a porch in the morning sunlight, connected by the small hand wrapped around Julian's finger. Then Oliver released his grip and turned back to his mother, burying his face against her neck. "He's shy with strangers," Elena explained, the pointed word hanging in the air between them. Strangers. That's what Julian was to his own son. A stranger in a suit, appearing out of nowhere with legal documents and demands. The test, Julian said, his voice rougher than before. We should proceed. Elena nodded, her arms tightening protectively around Oliver. Your lawyer can come in, but just him. I don't want a parade of strangers frightening my son. My son, not our son. The distinction was deliberate, Julian knew. The procedure was quick and painless. A simple cheek swab for both Julian and Oliver, performed by a medical technician who had accompanied the attorney. Oliver fussed only briefly, soothed by Elena's gentle words and the stuffed elephant she produced from a nearby toy basket. The results will be available by this afternoon. The technician informed them as he packed away the samples. I'll wait in town, Julian said. There's no need to impose on Ms. Vance any longer than necessary. Elena's expression revealed nothing as she showed the men to the door. Oliver balanced on her hip. As Julian stepped onto the porch, she spoke again. What happens after the test, Julian? I need to know what we're facing. He turned back, struck again by the quiet strength in her posture, the protective way she held their child. We'll discuss that when the results are in, he said, unwilling to commit to a path before he had absolute confirmation. No. Elena's voice was firm. You don't get to leave us in limbo. If you're here to take him from me, I deserve to know now. Julian studied her face. The face he had once known better than his own. The face that had haunted his dreams for months. I'm here for the truth, Elena. That's all I can tell you right now. As he walked back to the waiting car, he felt her eyes on him, burning with an intensity that followed him all the way into town. Sisters, have you ever had to stand your ground against someone who held all the power? Share your story in the comments below. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Elena moved through her day in a fog of anxiety, going through the motions of normalcy for Oliver's sake while her mind raced with contingency plans. She had known this day might come, had prepared for it as best she could. But now that Julian was here, flesh and blood instead of the specter that had haunted her nightmares, she felt woefully unprepared. She had seen something in his eyes when he looked at Oliver, something that frightened her more than his cold anger ever could. Recognition, connection, the undeniable pull of blood calling to blood. Maggie arrived shortly after Julian left, her round face creased with concern. I came as soon as I could get away from the shop. Was that him? The father? Elena nodded, watching Oliver stack blocks on the living room rug. Julian Sterling in the flesh. The billionaire? Maggie whistled low. When you said your ex had resources, I pictured a successful lawyer or doctor, not that. That's why I ran, Elena said quietly. You don't win against men like Julian. Not in court, not in the press. He owns judges, politicians, media outlets. If he decides he wants something, he takes it. And he wants Oliver. He wants to punish me, Elena corrected. Oliver is just the means to do it. Maggie settled beside her on the sofa. What happened between you two, Ellie? You've never really told me the whole story. Elena closed her eyes briefly, the memories she'd tried so hard to suppress rushing back with painful clarity. 3 years earlier, the grand ballroom of the Whitman Hotel glittered with New York's elite. Elena Vance stood near one of her firm's architectural models, explaining the sustainable design elements to a cluster of potential clients. At 28, she was the youngest senior designer at Archer & Associates, her talent for blending functionality with beauty earning her a reputation that belied her age. The rooftop garden isn't just aesthetic, she explained, pointing to the miniature trees atop the model. It reduces the building's carbon footprint by 15% and creates a natural cooling system that cuts energy costs. Impressive, said a deep voice behind her. But what about water conservation? Elena turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with storm-gray eyes and an expression of genuine interest. She recognized him immediately, Julian Sterling, tech innovator and CEO of Sterling Innovations. His company had revolutionized clean energy storage, and at 35 he was already worth billions. The rainwater collection system, she replied without missing a beat. feeds directly into a filtration unit that supplies the building's non-potable water needs. It reduces municipal water usage by 40%. A smile touched the corner of his mouth. You've thought of everything. That's my job, Mr. Sterling. Julian, please. He studied the model more closely. I've been looking for an architect who understands that sustainability doesn't have to sacrifice beauty. My foundation is planning a new headquarters in Chicago. Elena felt a flutter of excitement. The Sterling Foundation was known for its groundbreaking work in environmental conservation and education. I'd be happy to set up a meeting with our principal architects. I'd rather talk with you, he interrupted. You clearly understand the vision. That night had been the beginning. What started as a professional conversation about building design had evolved into hours of talking about everything from childhood memories to favorite books. Julian wasn't what she'd expected from a tech billionaire. He was thoughtful, attentive, surprisingly funny in a dry, understated way. He courted me old-school style, Elena told Maggie, a faint smile touching her lips at the memory. Flowers, handwritten notes, actual dates where he turned his phone off. He'd send his driver to pick me up for lunch breaks with picnic baskets from my favorite deli. Once, he flew me to Chicago for dinner just because I mentioned missing the deep dish pizza from my college days. Sounds like a fairy tale, Maggie said. It felt like one. Elena's smile faded. But Julian had scars. His ex-wife had cheated on him with his former business partner. The betrayal nearly destroyed him, not just emotionally, but professionally. They tried to force him out of his own company. He fought back and won, but it left him wary. Understandable, Maggie nodded. He was always honest about his trust issues, said he might seem paranoid sometimes, might need extra reassurance. I thought I understood. Elena shook her head. But understanding someone's wounds in theory is different from facing them in reality. 6 months into their relationship, Elena had moved into Julian's penthouse overlooking Central Park. Their life together had seemed perfect, her career flourishing under his encouragement, his workaholic tendencies softening with her influence. They balanced each other. Then came the unexpected pregnancy. I was terrified to tell him, Elena admitted. We talked about children in the abstract, someday future. But when I saw that positive test, I panicked. Julian was in the middle of a major product launch, working 18-hour days. How did he take it? Maggie asked. Elena's expression softened. He was wonderful, shocked at first, then excited. He came home the next day with a tiny pair of baby shoes and a diamond ring. Said he'd been planning to propose anyway. But now he had even more reason to make us a family. The engagement period had been blissful. Julian threw himself into preparations for the baby with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures. Researching the safest cribs, interviewing potential pediatricians, converting a spare bedroom into a nursery. We were going to get married in the spring. A small ceremony in the Berkshires where his grandmother had lived. Elena's voice hardened. Then Marcus Thorne happened. Who's Marcus Thorne? Maggie prompted. A ghost from my past. We were in college together at Northwestern. He asked me out repeatedly, wouldn't take no for an answer. It got uncomfortable enough that I had to switch classes to avoid him. Elena shook her head. I hadn't seen him in years. Then suddenly he was everywhere. At industry events, at restaurants where Julian and I were dining. I didn't think much of it at first. New York is a small world in some ways. But it wasn't coincidence, Maggie guessed. No, he'd been tracking me, following my career, my relationship with Julian. He'd become obsessed. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. One night, Julian was supposed to meet me at this restaurant downtown. Marcus approached my table, said Julian had called to say he was running late. It seemed plausible. Julian was often delayed by work. Oliver looked up from his blocks, sensing the tension in his mother's voice. Elena forced a smile for him before continuing. Marcus sat down, ordered drinks. He was charming, normal. Then he excused himself to take a call, and when he came back, he seemed different, agitated. He leaned across the table, said he needed to tell me something important. Elena's voice dropped to a near whisper. Marcus knew Julian had just entered the restaurant. As I leaned in to hear him, Marcus suddenly grabbed my shoulders and leaned in, hovering just inches from my lips. From Julian's perspective across the crowded, dim room, it was a perfect illusion of a passionate kiss. I froze in shock, my hands coming up to push him away. But in that split second, the damage was done. Julian didn't stay to see me shove Marcus back. He only saw the embrace he had been conditioned to fear. That's diabolical, Maggie breathed. It was calculated, Elena said, bitterness edging her voice. Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. He knew about Julian's ex-wife, about the betrayal that had left him with trust issues. He staged the whole thing perfectly. And Julian believed the worst. Elena nodded. I tried to explain what happened, but Julian was, I'd never seen him like that. Cold, distant. He wouldn't listen to anything I said. When I followed him home to explain, Marcus had already sent him doctored photos, old pictures of us from college events, manipulated to look recent. He'd created fake text exchanges, hotel receipts. But surely Julian would have investigated? A man with his resources. Pride, Elena said simply. Julian's pride was wounded. He'd been betrayed before by his ex-wife. Finding me, as he thought, in another man's arms confirmed his worst fears. He didn't want to investigate. He wanted to be right. The night of the restaurant incident played vividly in Elena's memory. She had followed Julian back to their penthouse, desperate to explain, to make him understand. The elevator ride up had been excruciating, Julian standing as far from her as possible, his face a mask of controlled fury. Julian, please, she had begged as they entered the apartment. It wasn't what it looked like. Marcus set the whole thing up. He's obsessed with me, has been since college. Convenient, Julian had replied, his voice frighteningly calm as he poured himself a scotch. A stalker from your past just happens to be in the same restaurant, at the same table with his lips on yours. He didn't kiss me. He made it look that way when he saw you coming. I pushed him away. After I left, I'm sure. Julian's laugh had been cold, hollow. You know what's interesting, Elena? I received some enlightening information tonight. Photos of you and this Marcus. Text messages. Hotel receipts. Elena had felt the blood drain from her face. What? That's impossible. He faked them, Julian. Whatever you saw, it's not real. Julian had pulled out his phone, showing her the images, her and Marcus at what appeared to be recent events, intimate moments that had never happened. The timestamps showed dates throughout their relationship. These are doctored, she had insisted, her voice rising with desperation. That's me at the alumni event 3 years ago. He's photoshopped it to look recent. Julian, you have to believe me. Like I believed Vanessa? He had asked quietly, referring to his ex-wife. She had explanations too. Coincidences. Misunderstandings. I was a fool then. I won't be a fool twice. This is different. I'm not Vanessa. I would never betray you, Julian. I love you. And yet here we are. He had drained his scotch, setting the glass down with deliberate care. Pack your things. I want you out by morning. The memory of what came next made Elena's chest tighten even now, 22 months later. I was desperate, she told Maggie. I knew once he calmed down, once he really thought about it, he'd realize I was telling the truth. So I told him about the baby, hoping it would make him pause, make him think. And, Maggie prompted when Elena fell silent. He said I was using the convenient pregnancy to trap him in a lie, that I was trying to pass off another man's child as his. Elena's voice broke. He said once the baby was born, we would do a DNA test. If the child was his, he would use every penny of his fortune to take it from me. That I would never see my baby again. Oh, Ellie. Maggie reached for her hand. I left that night, packed what I could carry and disappeared. I had some savings, enough to start over somewhere quiet. Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Until now. Until now, Elena agreed, watching Oliver abandon his blocks to toddle toward them. She scooped him up, breathing in the sweet baby scent of his hair. I don't know what changed, why he's here after all this time. But I know one thing, I won't let him take my son. The sound of tires on gravel silenced them both. Through the front window, Elena saw the black Bentley returning, right on schedule. Do you want me to stay? Maggie asked. Elena shook her head. This is between Julian and me, but be ready just in case. If anything happens, I'll be at home. One call, and I'll be here with the sheriff in 5 minutes. Maggie squeezed her shoulder before slipping out the back door, avoiding an encounter with the approaching men. Elena stood in the center of her living room, Oliver on her hip, as a knock sounded at the door. This was it, the moment that would determine their future. With a deep breath, she went to face Julian Sterling and whatever verdict he had brought with him. If you've ever been wrongfully accused, hit that like button. And if you're enjoying this journey, subscribe to join our storytelling family. Julian stood on the porch of the small cottage for the second time that day, the sealed envelope from the lab heavy in his hand. The results had come back exactly as he had expected, 99.9999% probability of paternity. Oliver was his son, had always been his son, just as Elena had claimed from the beginning. The knowledge sat like a stone in his stomach, not the vindication he had once imagined, but a weight of responsibility and regret. The door opened, and Elena appeared with Oliver in her arms. The boy was dressed in fresh clothes, tiny jeans and a blue sweater that matched his mother's, his dark curls damp from what must have been a recent bath. He regarded Julian with solemn curiosity, one small hand playing with the collar of Elena's sweater. You have the results, Elena said, her eyes fixed on the envelope. Julian nodded. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for the doorstep. After a moment's hesitation, Elena stepped aside, allowing him into the small, sun-filled living room. It was nothing like the sleek, minimalist spaces she had once designed in New York. This room was warm, lived in, with comfortable furniture and walls covered in framed photographs and Oliver's colorful artwork. Would you like to sit? She offered, gesturing to the sofa. Julian took a seat, watching as Elena settled in an armchair opposite him, Oliver secure in her lap. The boy studied Julian with unabashed curiosity, his gray eyes Julian's eyes, taking in every detail of the stranger in his home. The results confirm what you've always said, Julian began, placing the envelope on the coffee table between them. Oliver is my son. Elena's arms tightened around the boy. I never doubted it. No, you didn't. Julian's voice was quiet. Even when I accused you of lying, even when I threatened to take him from you, you never wavered from the truth. Something in his tone made Elena look up sharply. What are you saying, Julian? He met her gaze directly. I'm saying I know about Marcus Thorne. I know what he did, what he orchestrated. Elena's breath caught. What? I know he manipulated those photos, created fake messages, staged that scene in the restaurant. Julian's jaw tightened. I know you never betrayed me, Elena. The words she had longed to hear for 22 months hung in the air between them. Elena felt lightheaded, her grip on Oliver the only thing anchoring her to reality. How long? She managed. How long have you known? 6 months. Julian's gaze dropped to his hands. It started with inconsistencies in the evidence he provided. Dates that didn't align with your schedule. Places you couldn't have been because you were with me. Once I started looking, really looking, the fabrications became obvious. 6 months? Elena repeated, her voice hollow. You've known for 6 months that I was telling the truth, and you're only here now? Julian's expression tightened with what might have been shame. Finding the truth was one thing. Facing it was another. I had to confront what I'd done to you, what my pride and paranoia had cost us both. Cost us? Elena's laugh held no humor. It cost me everything, Julian. My home, my career, my sense of security. It cost Oliver his father for the first year of his life. I know. Julian's voice was rough with emotion. There's no excuse for what I did, for not believing you, for threatening to take our child. Then why are you here? Elena demanded. If you know the truth, if you acknowledge what you did, why come with lawyers and DNA tests? Why not just leave us in peace? Julian leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I needed to face you, to tell you the truth, to give you what you deserve. And what's that? In answer, Julian reached into his jacket and withdrew a thick envelope. This contains several things. First, a legal document acknowledging Oliver as my son and establishing a trust in his name. The trust is controlled entirely by you until he turns 25. Second, the deed to a house in your name wherever you want, completely your choice. Third, a formal confession of my actions, legally notarized, that you can use however you see fit if I ever try to interfere with your life or Oliver's without your explicit permission. Elena stared at the envelope, unable to process what she was hearing. I don't understand. I'm not here to take Oliver from you, Elena. I'm here to make amends, if that's even possible. Julian's voice softened. And to meet my son properly, if you'll allow it. Oliver chose that moment to slide from Elena's lap, toddling across the small space between them to investigate the stranger. He stopped in front of Julian, head tilted in assessment, before offering up the stuffed elephant he'd been clutching. He said solemnly, which Elena knew was his word for elephant. Julian looked to Elena, silently asking permission before accepting the toy. Thank you, he said to Oliver, his voice gentle in a way Elena had almost forgotten. That's very kind of you. Oliver beamed, clearly pleased with himself, before turning and making his way back to Elena. The simple interaction, a child's innocent trust, a father's careful respect, broke something open inside her. Why didn't you look for me sooner? She asked, the question that had haunted her for 22 months finally finding voice. If you loved me, if you trusted me at all, why didn't you question what you saw? Why didn't you fight for us? Julian's face reflected a pain that matched her own. Because I was a coward, he admitted. Because it was easier to believe the worst than to risk being hurt again. Because my pride wouldn't let me consider that I might be wrong. He paused. And because by the time I realized my mistake, you were gone without a trace. It took months to find you. How did you find me? Elena asked. Your grandmother's obituary, Julian said quietly. It mentioned her surviving family, including a great-grandson, Oliver, in Seabrook. It was the first real lead. Elena closed her eyes briefly. Her grandmother had passed away 3 months ago. The small mention in the local paper of her hometown, a place Elena hadn't lived in years, had been enough to lead Julian to them. What happens now? She asked, opening her eyes to find Julian watching her with an intensity that was achingly familiar. That depends on you, he said. I have no right to make demands. No right to expect forgiveness. I'm here to offer what I can. Financial security for you and Oliver, legal protection, and... He hesitated. And the truth about his father, when and if you decide he should know it. Elena studied the man before her, the man she had once loved with her whole heart, the man who had shattered that heart with his distrust, the man who now sat in her living room offering amends without expectation. And what about you? She asked. Where do you fit in this picture you're painting? Wherever you allow me to fit, Julian answered simply. I would like to know my son, to be part of his life in whatever way you deem appropriate. But I will respect your boundaries, Elena. I've forfeited the right to anything more. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This was not the cold, vengeful man who had threatened to take her child. This was the Julian she had fallen in love with, thoughtful, direct, capable of a humility few would expect from a man of his position. I need time, Elena said finally. This is a lot to process. Julian nodded, rising to his feet. Of course. Take all the time you need. My contact information is in the envelope, along with the legal documents. I'm staying at the inn in town for a few days, but I can leave sooner if my presence makes things difficult for you. As he moved toward the door, Oliver suddenly toddled after him, reaching up to tug at his pant leg. Julian froze, looking down at the small hand clutching the expensive fabric of his suit. Up? Oliver demanded. raising his arms in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be lifted. Julian looked to Elena, uncertainty clear in his expression. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "It's okay." With careful movements, Julian lifted Oliver into his arms. The boy immediately reached for Julian's tie, fascinated by the silky material. "Blue," Oliver said proudly, one of the few colors he could name. "That's right," Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's blue." Elena watched as her son placed a small hand on Julian's cheek, examining his face with the innocent curiosity of a child. The resemblance between them was undeniable. The same eyes, the same determined set of the jaw, even the same furrow of concentration between their brows. "He looks like you," she said softly. Julian nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with unshed tears. "He's perfect, Elena. You've done an amazing job with him." "He makes it easy," she replied, echoing words Julian had once said about her. "He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "To us," Julian corrected gently, then immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry. I have no right to claim that connection." Elena didn't contradict him, but something shifted in her expression. "You should go," she said, rising to take Oliver from his arms. "I need to put him down for his nap." Julian relinquished the child reluctantly, his hands lingering for just a moment as he passed Oliver to Elena. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me meet him, for hearing me out." Elena nodded, her emotions too complex to voice. As she showed Julian to the door, he paused on the threshold. "Elena," he said quietly, "whatever you decide, know that I am truly sorry for the pain I caused you. You deserved better." With that, he was gone, walking back to the waiting car with measured steps that betrayed none of the emotion she had glimpsed in his eyes. Elena closed the door and leaned against it, Oliver heavy and warm in her arms. The weight of the past 22 months, the fear, the anger, the loneliness, pressed down on her, alongside this new, unexpected reality. Julian knew the truth, had known it for months, was offering her everything she should have had all along, with no strings attached. Why, then, did she feel so conflicted? Because forgiveness wasn't a simple transaction, she realized. Because trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired with legal documents and confessions, no matter how sincere. Because the man who had just held their son with such tenderness was the same man who had once threatened to take that child from her forever. "What do we do now, little man?" she whispered to Oliver, who was already drowsy against her shoulder. The boy's only answer was a soft sigh as he drifted towards sleep, untroubled by the complexities that plagued his mother's heart. Elena carried Oliver to his room, laying him gently in his crib. As she watched him sleep, her mind raced with possibilities and fears. Julian's revelation had upended everything she thought she knew about their situation. For 22 months, she had cast him as the villain in their story, the powerful man who had chosen pride over truth, threats over trust. That narrative had sustained her through lonely nights and uncertain days, fueling her determination to build a new life for herself and Oliver. But now the story had changed. Julian had acknowledged his mistake, had sought the truth albeit too late, had come not to take their child but to offer amends without expectation. What did that mean for her carefully constructed world? Elena moved to the kitchen, making herself a cup of tea with mechanical movements as she tried to sort through her tangled emotions. The envelope Julian had left sat on the coffee table, its contents promising security, protection, freedom, all the things she had fought for since fleeing New York. With trembling hands, she finally opened it, spreading the documents across the table. The trust fund for Oliver was substantial, enough to pay for the finest education, to give him opportunities Elena could never provide alone. The deed was for a property in Seabrook, not far from where she currently rented, a beautiful Victorian overlooking the harbor that she had admired on her walks with Oliver. But it was the third document that held her attention longest. Julian's confession was comprehensive, detailing his failure to believe her, his threats regarding custody, his eventual discovery of Marcus Thorne's deception. It was notarized, legally binding, and gave Elena complete power over any future relationship Julian might have with Oliver. It was, in essence, a surrender of control from a man who had built his empire on maintaining it. Elena set the papers aside, her tea growing cold as she stared out the window at the gathering dusk. The question that had been circling her mind since Julian's departure finally crystallized. What did she want? Not just for Oliver, though his well-being would always be her priority, but for herself. Did she want Julian in their lives? Could she trust him again, even in the limited role of a co-parent? Could she forgive him for the pain he had caused? She had no answers, only questions that would require time and reflection to resolve. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that made Seabrook's harbor glitter like scattered diamonds. Elena took Oliver for their usual morning walk, the routine a comfort amid the emotional turmoil of the past 24 hours. As they rounded the corner near the harbor shops, she saw him, Julian, standing at the railing overlooking the water, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. He wasn't wearing a suit today, but casual clothes that reminded her of weekend mornings in New York. Dark jeans, a gray Henley that matched his eyes, sleeves pushed up to reveal strong forearms. For a moment, Elena considered turning back, avoiding the encounter. But Oliver had already spotted the familiar figure, pointing excitedly. "Man!" he exclaimed, one of his favorite words for people he recognized. Julian turned at the sound, his expression shifting from surprise to cautious pleasure as he saw them approaching. He made no move toward them, waiting instead for Elena to decide whether to acknowledge him. "Good morning," she said as they drew near, her voice carefully neutral. "Good morning," Julian replied, his eyes moving from her face to Oliver's. "He looks happy today. He loves the water," Elena explained, adjusting Oliver in his stroller. "We walk down here every morning to watch the boats." Julian nodded, a small smile touching his lips as Oliver babbled excitedly, pointing at a passing sailboat. "He's very verbal for his age." "He started talking early," Elena agreed, a hint of maternal pride warming her voice despite her resolve to remain detached. "He has about 20 words now, and he understands much more than he can say." An awkward silence fell between them, filled only by Oliver's happy chatter. Julian broke it first. "I was just getting coffee," he said, gesturing to the small cafe behind them. Would you like to join me? Both of you, I mean." Elena hesitated, torn between the caution that had become second nature and the undeniable pull of unresolved questions. "I don't think." "Please," Julian interrupted gently. "Just coffee. In public. No pressure, no expectations." Something in his expression, a vulnerability she had rarely seen in the confident CEO, swayed her. "All right," she agreed. "Just coffee." The cafe was busy with morning customers, but Julian secured them a table by the window, where Oliver could watch the harbor activity. He ordered Elena's coffee exactly as she had always taken it, a latte with an extra shot and a touch of vanilla, a small detail that shouldn't have affected her but somehow did. "I read through the documents," Elena said once they were settled, Oliver contentedly munching on the banana she had packed for him. Julian nodded, waiting for her to continue. "It's generous," she acknowledged. "More than generous." "It's the least I can do," Julian replied. "It doesn't begin to make up for what happened, but I hope it provides some security." Elena studied him over the rim of her cup. "Why the house?" "The trust fund, I understand, it's for Oliver. But the house is in my name only." Julian's gaze was steady. "Because you deserve stability. A home that can't be taken away. And because—" He hesitated. "Because I remember how you used to talk about wanting a Victorian someday, with a porch swing and room for a garden." The fact that he remembered such a detail, a dream she had shared during a lazy Sunday morning in bed, caught her off guard. It was easier to think of Julian as the cold, vengeful man who had threatened her than to reconcile that image with the one before her now. A man who remembered her dreams and was trying, however imperfectly, to make amends. "What do you want from me, Julian?" she asked directly. "Beyond meeting Oliver, what are you hoping for here?" Julian set down his coffee, considering his words carefully. Honestly, I don't know. When I started looking for you, it was about confirming the truth, about meeting my son. I didn't think beyond that. He met her eyes. I don't expect forgiveness, Elena. I don't expect us to be what we were. I want to be part of Oliver's life, in whatever way you deem appropriate. And I want you to know that I recognize the gravity of what I did. And Marcus? Elena asked, the name still bitter on her tongue. What happened to him? A hardness entered Julian's expression. He's been dealt with. Legally, he added, seeing her concern. Once I discovered what he'd done, I had my legal team build a case. He's facing charges for fraud, harassment, and defamation. His architectural license has been revoked. He won't bother you again. Elena absorbed this information, feeling a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. The fear of Marcus finding her, of continuing his obsessive pursuit, had been a shadow at the back of her mind even as she focused on Julian's more immediate threat. Thank you for that, she said quietly. Julian nodded, his expression softening as he watched Oliver, who was now attempting to feed Julian a piece of his banana. Without thinking, Julian leaned forward, accepting the sticky offering with exaggerated appreciation that made Oliver giggle. The sound, her son's laughter, Julian's gentle response, created a strange ache in Elena's chest. This was what should have been. What could have been, if pride and fear hadn't torn them apart. I should go, she said abruptly, gathering Oliver's things. He needs his nap soon. Julian didn't try to stop her, rising to help her with the stroller instead. Of course, thank you for the coffee and the conversation. As they stood outside the cafe, Elena found herself reluctant to simply walk away. How long will you be in Seabrook? She asked. As long as necessary, Julian replied. I've cleared my schedule. I can work remotely for now. Elena nodded, processing this. I need time, Julian, to think about all of this, about what it means for Oliver. For me. Take all the time you need, he assured her. I'm not going anywhere. The promise, or was it a warning? Followed her as she walked back to the cottage, Oliver already drowsy in his stroller. Julian Sterling wasn't going anywhere. The question was, what did that mean for the life she had so carefully built without him? My queens, what would you do in Elena's position? Would you forgive, or would you protect your heart? Tag someone who's shown incredible strength when faced with a difficult choice. The days that followed fell into an unexpected pattern. Each morning, Elena and Oliver would encounter Julian during their harbor walk. What began as brief, awkward exchanges gradually evolved into longer conversations, shared coffees, even a lunch when Oliver was particularly energetic and unwilling to return home for his nap. Julian was careful, respectful of the boundaries Elena established. He never pushed for more time than she offered, never attempted to see Oliver without her present, never presumed upon the fragile trust that was slowly rebuilding between them. A week after his arrival in Seabrook, Elena found herself watching Julian and Oliver on the small beach near the lighthouse. Julian was helping the boy build a sandcastle, his expensive watch set aside, his hands covered in wet sand as he patiently followed Oliver's enthusiastic if incomprehensible directions. There was a gentleness in Julian's interactions with their son that touched something deep in Elena's heart. He was naturally paternal in a way that surprised her, patient, attentive, delighting in Oliver's smallest achievements. It was a side of Julian she had glimpsed during their time together in New York, in the way he mentored young employees, in his quiet generosity toward his housekeeper's children, but never so clearly as now. He's good with him, Maggie observed, having joined Elena for their beach outing. Better than most first-time dads. Elena nodded, unable to deny the evidence before her. He's trying. And what about you? Maggie asked, her voice gentle but probing. What are you feeling about all this? Elena sighed, watching as Oliver dumped a bucket of sand onto Julian's outstretched legs, earning a laugh rather than a reprimand. Confused, angry still sometimes, but also, I don't know. There's a part of me that remembers why I loved him, why I wanted to build a life with him. Do you think you could trust him again? Maggie's question went to the heart of Elena's dilemma. I don't know, she admitted. He hurt me, Maggie. Not just with the accusations, but with how quickly he believed the worst of me. How easily he discarded everything we had built. People make mistakes, Maggie said. Even big ones. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a fundamental failure of trust. Elena's voice hardened. He threatened to take my child. Yes, he did, Maggie agreed. And that's unforgivable. Unless you decide to forgive it. Elena turned to look at her friend. What would you do? Maggie considered the question seriously. I can't answer that for you, honey. But I will say this, forgiveness isn't about the other person deserving it. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of anger. And sometimes, the people who hurt us most deeply are the ones who can help us heal, if we let them. Elena mulled over Maggie's words as she watched Julian and Oliver. The man building sandcastles with her son was both familiar and strange, the Julian she had loved, yet changed by the events that had separated them. There was a humility to him now, a carefulness that spoke of hard lessons learned. Could she trust that change? Could she risk her heart, and more importantly, Oliver's, on the hope that Julian had truly transformed? As if sensing her gaze, Julian looked up, meeting her eyes across the sand. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of all that had been lost, all that might still be salvaged. He smiled, a small, uncertain gesture that reminded her of their first meetings, before success and betrayal had complicated everything. Elena found herself smiling back, a reflexive response that surprised her with its ease. That evening, after Oliver was asleep, Elena sat on her porch swing, watching the stars emerge over the harbor. The spring air was cool but not uncomfortable, carrying the scent of salt and distant flowers. The sound of footsteps on the gravel path made her look up. Julian stood at the edge of her yard, hesitant, as if unsure of his welcome. I was walking back to the inn, he explained. I saw you sitting here. Elena nodded, neither inviting him closer nor sending him away. After a moment's hesitation, Julian approached, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. May I? He asked, gesturing to the space beside her on the swing. Elena considered refusing, maintaining the physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf between them. But something, curiosity, perhaps, or simply fatigue with the constant tension, made her nod. Julian settled beside her, careful to leave space between them. For a while, they sat in silence, the gentle creak of the swing the only sound. I never thanked you, Elena said finally. Julian looked at her, surprised. For what? For finding the truth about Marcus. For making sure he can't hurt anyone else the way he hurt us. Julian's expression darkened. I should have looked for the truth sooner. Should have questioned what I saw, what he presented as evidence. Yes, you should have, Elena agreed, her voice firm but not unkind. Why didn't you? It was the question that had haunted her for 22 months. The one she had asked before but never received a satisfactory answer to. This time, Julian seemed prepared to truly answer it. Because I was afraid, he admitted, his gaze fixed on the distant harbor lights. Not just of being betrayed again, though that was part of it. I was afraid of how much I loved you, of how completely you had become essential to me. Elena frowned. That doesn't make sense, Julian. If you loved me. When Vanessa betrayed me, Julian interrupted, it nearly destroyed me, not just emotionally, but my company, my life's work. I survived by shutting down, by becoming the cold, calculating businessman everyone expected me to be. It worked. I rebuilt, stronger than before. He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. Then I met you, and suddenly all those walls I'd built were crumbling. I was vulnerable again, hopeful, planning a future that included more than just business success. Terrified me, Elena, the power you had over me. So when you thought I betrayed you, it confirmed my worst fear, that opening myself up again had been a mistake, that I was destined to be betrayed by those I loved most. Julian's voice was raw with honesty. It was easier to believe you had betrayed me than to consider I might have been wrong. Because if I was wrong about you, what else might I be wrong about? What other certainties in my life might crumble? Elena absorbed his words, recognizing the truth in them. Julian Sterling, for all his power and success, was a man shaped by past wounds, just as she was. His reaction, while inexcusable, was at least understandable through the lens of his previous pain. "What changed?" she asked. "What made you finally look for the truth?" Julian's smile was sad. "I found the sonogram picture, the one from our first ultrasound. It had fallen behind the dresser in the bedroom. Seeing it, remembering that day, how happy we were, I couldn't reconcile that memory with the narrative I'd constructed about you." He paused, his voice roughening. "And I realized that even if you had betrayed me, which I no longer believed, I needed to know my child. To be the father my own father never was to me." The mention of Julian's father, a cold, distant man who had valued achievement over affection, added another layer to Elena's understanding. Julian's fear of repeating his father's mistakes had been a frequent topic during their late-night conversations in New York. "So you started investigating?" Elena prompted. Julian nodded. "Once I actually looked at the evidence with a clear mind, the inconsistencies were obvious. The timestamps on photos that couldn't be accurate because you were with me. Text messages sent when you were in meetings without your phone. Hotel receipts for nights when we were together. And Marcus. He wasn't as clever as he thought. Once my security team started digging, they found everything: the photo manipulation software on his computer, the fake email accounts he'd created, even a journal detailing his obsession with you dating back to college." Julian's expression hardened. "He's facing serious charges, Elena. He won't hurt you or anyone else again." The knowledge should have been comforting, but Elena found herself dwelling on a different aspect of Julian's revelation. "You said you've known the truth for 6 months. Why wait so long to find me?" Julian's hesitation was brief but noticeable. "Shame," he admitted finally. "Once I knew the truth, the full weight of what I'd done hit me. I'd threatened the woman I loved. I'd missed the birth of my child. I'd let pride and fear destroyed everything that mattered." He looked at her directly. "I didn't know if I had the right to disrupt the life you'd built without me. If my presence would cause more harm than good." "What changed your mind?" Elena asked. "Oliver," Julian said simply. "The thought of him growing up without knowing me, without understanding that his father's absence wasn't because he wasn't wanted or loved, couldn't bear it. Not after growing up with a father who was physically present but emotionally absent." Elena nodded, understanding. Julian's relationship with his father, a successful but cold man who had viewed his son as an extension of himself rather than an individual, had shaped him in ways he was still discovering. "I want better for Oliver," Julian continued, "even if that means facing my own failures, even if it means accepting whatever limited role you decide I can have in his life." The humility in his voice, the genuine regret, touched something in Elena that she had thought long buried. The anger that had sustained her for 22 months began to feel heavy, a burden she was tired of carrying. "I'm still angry with you," she said honestly. "What you did, the threats, the accusations, they changed me, Julian. Made me someone who's always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the next blow." "I know," Julian acknowledged, "and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting that, Elena. There's nothing I can say or do that will erase the pain I caused you." "No, there isn't," she agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't move forward. For Oliver's sake, if nothing else." Hope flickered in Julian's eyes. "What are you saying?" Elena took a deep breath, making a decision she had been approaching gradually over the past week. "I'm saying that Oliver deserves to know his father, that I'm willing to work toward a co-parenting relationship that gives him that opportunity." Julian nodded, accepting the limited offer with grace. "Thank you. I promise I won't let either of you down again." "Don't make promises you might not be able to keep," Elena cautioned. "Just be present, be consistent. Show Oliver the man I thought I knew, not the one who threatened to take him from me." I will, Julian vowed. Every day, in every way I can. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling around them. The distance between them on the swing seemed both vast and insignificant, a physical representation of the emotional journey still ahead. It's getting late, Elena said finally. I should check on Oliver. Julian rose immediately. Of course. Thank you for talking with me, for being willing to consider a path forward. As he stepped off the porch, Elena called after him. Julian. He turned, his face half illuminated by the porch light. Yes. The house, she said. The one you bought for me. It's too much. Julian shook his head. It's yours, Elena. No strings attached. Whether or not you ever fully forgive me, whether or not we ever move beyond co-parenting, you and Oliver deserve security. Elena studied him, searching for any hint of manipulation or ulterior motive. Finding none, she nodded slowly. Thank you, not just for the house, but for respecting my boundaries, for being patient. A small smile touched Julian's lips. Patience was never my strong suit in business. I'm learning it's essential in matters of the heart. With that, he turned and walked away, his figure gradually disappearing into the darkness beyond her yard. Elena remained on the swing, her thoughts as vast and complex as the starry sky above. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with potential pitfalls and painful memories. But for the first time in 22 months, Elena felt something like hope stirring in her chest. Not for a romantic reconciliation, but for a future where her son would know his father, where the wounds of the past might eventually heal into scars that no longer ached with every movement. It was a beginning, however tentative, and sometimes beginnings were enough. The next few weeks brought a gradual shift in their dynamic. Julian found a small house to rent in Seabrook, making it clear he intended to stay for the foreseeable future. He established a routine that respected Elena's boundaries while allowing him to be a consistent presence in Oliver's life. Morning walks by the harbor, afternoon playtimes at the park, occasional dinners at Elena's cottage where he would read Oliver bedtime stories before leaving. Elena watched the bond between father and son grow with a mixture of joy and trepidation. Oliver, with a child's natural resilience, accepted Julian's presence without question, delighting in the attention and affection his father showered upon him. Julian, for his part, approached fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to his business ventures, researching child development, learning Oliver's routines and preferences, adapting his own schedule to accommodate his son's needs. He's moved his entire operation to Seabrook, Elena remarked to Maggie one afternoon as they watched Julian push Oliver on the swings at the small-town park. His assistant flew in yesterday with documents for him to sign. Apparently, he's running Sterling Innovations remotely for now. That's quite a commitment, Maggie observed, especially for a man who used to live and breathe his company. Elena nodded, unable to deny the evidence of Julian's dedication. He had made no demands, no assumptions about his place in their lives. Instead, he had simply shown up, day after day, proving through actions rather than words that he was committed to being the father Oliver deserved. As spring deepened into summer, Elena found herself gradually lowering the walls she had built around her heart. Not completely. The memory of Julian's betrayal was still too raw for that, but enough to allow for genuine conversations, shared laughter over Oliver's antics, even occasional moments of the easy companionship they had once enjoyed. One evening in late June, as they sat on Elena's porch after putting Oliver to bed, Julian broached a subject they had carefully avoided. "I've been offered a major contract in Chicago," he said, watching her face for a reaction. "It would mean significant expansion for Sterling Innovations, hundreds of new jobs." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the fear of abandonment that had become her constant companion. "I see," she said carefully. "When would you leave?" "That depends," Julian replied, his gaze steady, "on what we decide together." "Together?" Elena repeated, surprised. "Yes, together." Julian leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I won't make decisions that affect Oliver, or you, without consultation. Not anymore." The contrast between this approach and his unilateral ultimatum 22 months ago was stark. Elena studied him, seeing the change that time and reflection had wrought. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "Several possibilities," Julian said. "I could commute from Seabrook, though that would mean less time with Oliver. I could decline the contract, though it would be a significant opportunity lost. Or," he hesitated, "or you and Oliver could consider relocating to Chicago. Not to live with me," he added quickly, seeing her expression, "but to be in the same city, to continue building this co-parenting relationship we've established." Elena was silent, processing the implications of each option. The thought of leaving Seabrook, the safe haven she had created, was daunting. But so was the prospect of Julian's reduced presence in Oliver's life, just when their bond was flourishing. "I don't expect an answer now," Julian assured her. "It's a big decision. I just wanted to be transparent about the situation, to include you in the process." "Thank you for that," Elena said, genuinely appreciative of his approach. "I'll need time to think about it." Julian nodded, accepting her response without pressure. As he rose to leave, he paused, seeming to debate whether to say more. "What is it?" Elena prompted. "I just want you to know," he said quietly, "that whatever you decide, my priority is Oliver's well-being, and yours. If staying in Seabrook is what's best for both of you, then that's what we'll do. The company can manage without me being physically present in Chicago." The willingness to put family before business, something the old Julian would have struggled with, was perhaps the clearest evidence of how profoundly he had changed. Elena found herself touched by his sincerity, by the depth of his commitment to their son. "I'll let you know my thoughts soon," she promised. After Julian left, Elena sat alone on the porch, contemplating the crossroads before her. Chicago represented uncertainty, a step away from the safety she had carefully constructed. But it also offered possibilities for Oliver to have both parents actively involved in his life, for Elena to perhaps resume her architectural career in a city rich with opportunities, for a fresh start unburdened by the shadows of Seabrook's isolation. The decision, when it came, surprised even her with its clarity. 2 weeks later, Elena stood in the empty living room of her Seabrook cottage, the last of her and Oliver's belongings packed into the moving truck outside. Julian had offered to handle all the logistics of the move, but Elena had insisted on maintaining her independence, hiring her own movers, finding her own apartment in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, close enough to Julian's penthouse for convenient co-parenting, but distinctly separate. "Ready for our adventure, little man?" she asked Oliver, who was exploring the empty space with fascination, his footsteps echoing on the bare floors. "Go car," he replied enthusiastically, one of his newest phrases. Elena laughed, scooping him up for a final look around the cottage that had been their sanctuary. "That's right. We're going on a long car ride to our new home." A knock at the open door announced Julian's arrival. He stood on the threshold, respectful as always of her space. "The truck is all loaded," he reported. "Everything okay in here?" Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. "Just saying goodbye." Julian's expression softened with understanding. "It's a beautiful place. It served its purpose well." "Yes, it did," Elena agreed. "It was exactly what we needed. A safe harbor." "And now?" Julian asked, the question encompassing far more than their physical relocation. Elena met his gaze directly. "Now we see what comes next. One day at a time." The drive to Chicago was long but surprisingly pleasant. They had decided to travel together, Julian driving Elena's car while she sat in back with Oliver, keeping him entertained during the journey. The arrangement was practical rather than romantic, but there was a comfortable familiarity to it that reminded Elena of road trips they had taken during their time together in New York. As they crossed into Illinois, Oliver finally succumbed to sleep, his head lolling against his car seat. In the resulting quiet, Elena found herself studying Julian's profile as he drove, noting the changes 22 months had wrought. There were new lines at the corners of his eyes, a touch more silver at his temples. But the most significant change was in his demeanor, a calmness, a patience that had replaced his former intensity. You're staring, Julian observed, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Elena didn't deny it. I'm trying to reconcile the man you were with the man you are now. Julian's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Are they so different? Yes, Elena said honestly. The Julian I knew in New York would never have put his company second to family considerations. Would never have spent weeks in a small coastal town just to build a relationship with his son. Would never have given someone who hurt him a second chance. I didn't give myself a second chance, Julian corrected gently. You did. And it's a gift I don't take lightly, Elena. The sincerity in his voice touched her. Over the past weeks, as they had planned this move, negotiated the parameters of their co-parenting arrangement, Elena had found herself gradually lowering her guard. Not completely, the memory of his betrayal was still too raw for that, but enough to acknowledge the genuine change in him. I'm not the same person either, she admitted. The Elena you knew was more trusting, more open. Julian's expression tightened with regret. I'm sorry for that, for making you doubt yourself, for forcing you to become someone harder in order to survive. Don't be, Elena surprised herself by saying. That hardness protected Oliver, protected me. I needed it. And now? Julian asked, echoing her earlier question. Elena looked out the window at the passing landscape, considering. Now, I think I'm ready to find a balance. To be strong without being closed off. To trust again cautiously. The words hung between them, an acknowledgement of how far they had come and how far they still had to go. As they approached Chicago, the skyline rising before them like a promise of new beginnings, Elena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This move wasn't about rekindling what she and Julian had lost. That relationship, with its blind trust and passionate intensity, belonged to the past. This was about creating something new. A partnership based on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and the shared love of their son. It wasn't the future she had imagined when she fled New York 22 months ago, terrified and alone. It was something unexpected, something that had grown from the ashes of betrayal and the slow, patient work of rebuilding trust. 6 months later, Elena stood in her Chicago apartment, watching the first snow of winter dust the city in white. Oliver, now approaching his 2nd birthday, was at Julian's penthouse for their regular weekend visit, an arrangement that had evolved naturally as they settled into their new life. The move had been good for all of them. Oliver thrived with the stability of having both parents actively involved in his life. Julian had found a balance between his corporate responsibilities and fatherhood that seemed to fulfill him in ways his previous single-minded focus on business never had. And Elena had rediscovered her passion for architecture, accepting a position with a prestigious firm that valued her innovative approach to sustainable design. Their co-parenting relationship had developed into something neither of them had anticipated. A genuine friendship built on mutual respect and the shared joy of watching their son grow. Julian had been true to his word, never overstepping the boundaries Elena established, never using his wealth or influence to undermine her authority as Oliver's mother. The sound of her doorbell interrupted Elena's thoughts. Opening the door, she found Julian and Oliver, both bundled against the cold, their cheeks flushed from the winter air. We come bearing gifts, Julian announced, holding up a bag from Elena's favorite bakery. Someone insisted on bringing you a chocolate croissant. Mama Snow, Oliver exclaimed, reaching for her with mittened hands. Elena laughed, taking him into her arms. I see that. Did you and Daddy build a snowman? Too little, Oliver explained seriously. Need more. He's right, Julian confirmed, stepping inside and removing his coat. We need a proper accumulation for snowman construction. I promised him we'd try again next weekend if the weather cooperates. The easy domesticity of the moment, Julian moving comfortably through her kitchen to prepare coffee, Oliver chattering about his adventures in the snow, struck Elena with unexpected force. This was family, she realized. Not the traditional structure she had once envisioned, but something equally valuable. Two people committed to raising their child with love and respect, regardless of their personal history. Later, after Oliver had been settled for his nap, Elena and Julian sat at her kitchen table, the comfortable silence of long acquaintance between them. "I have something for you," Julian said finally, reaching into his pocket. "An early Christmas gift of sorts." He placed a small velvet box on the table between them. Elena looked at it warily. "Julian, it's not what you think," he assured her quickly. "Open it." Inside, Elena found not a ring as she had feared, but a delicate silver key on a simple chain. "What is this?" she asked, confused. "A key to the lake house," Julian explained. "I bought a property in Michigan, about 2 hours from here. Nothing extravagant, just a simple place where Oliver can experience nature, learn to swim, build those snowmen he's so eager to create." Elena turned the key over in her hand. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because it's as much yours as it is mine," Julian said simply. "A neutral space where we can take Oliver for weekends, holidays, summer vacations. Where he can have both his parents without the complications of our separate lives in the city." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Elena deeply. It represented exactly what they had been working toward. A partnership focused on Oliver's well-being, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "It's perfect." Julian smiled, relief evident in his expression. "I was hoping you'd think so. We can go up after Christmas if you'd like. See if it meets with your approval before making any firm plans." Elena nodded, already imagining summer days by the lake, Oliver learning to swim, winter evenings by a fireplace. Simple family moments that had once seemed impossible. As Julian prepared to leave, gathering his coat and scarf, Elena found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. From the devastating night in New York when Julian had accused her of betrayal, to the tense confrontation on her Seabrook porch, to this moment of genuine friendship and co-parenting harmony. It was a path neither of them could have predicted. "Julian," she said as he reached the door, "I want you to know something." He turned, his expression open, attentive. "I forgive you," Elena said simply. "Not because you deserve it or because what happened doesn't matter anymore, but because carrying that anger was exhausting. Because Oliver deserves parents who can look forward, not just backward." Julian's expression shifted, a complex mixture of emotions crossing his face. Surprise, gratitude, a deep relief that seemed to lighten something in his eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That means more than I can express." Elena nodded, acknowledging the significance of the moment for both of them. "I'm not saying I've forgotten, or that I ever will. But I am saying that I'm ready to truly move forward." "That's all I could hope for," Julian replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Good night, Elena." As she closed the door behind him, Elena felt a sense of peace settle over her. Forgiveness, she was discovering, wasn't a single moment but a process. A daily choice to release the pain of the past and embrace the possibilities of the future. The lake house became their sanctuary over the following months. Winter weekends were spent building snowmen and sledding down gentle slopes, Oliver's laughter echoing across the frozen landscape. As spring arrived, they planted a small garden together, Julian displaying a surprising knowledge of horticulture learned from his grandmother during childhood summers. By summer, their weekends at the lake had developed a comfortable rhythm. Julian would arrive at Elena's apartment early Saturday morning, helping load Oliver and their supplies into her car. They would drive together, using the time to discuss Oliver's development, share stories from their work weeks, plan future outings. At the lake house, they functioned as a seamless team, Julian handling the outdoor activities and maintenance, Elena managing meals and Oliver's schedule, both of them sharing bedtime stories and morning pancake making. It was during one such weekend in late August, as they sat on the dock watching the sunset while Oliver slept exhausted from a day of swimming, that Elena realized something had shifted between them. The careful distance she had maintained, the emotional walls erected for self-protection, had gradually eroded without her noticing. "Penny for your thoughts," Julian said, noticing her pensive expression. Elena smiled, watching the golden light play across the water. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, how different things are now from what I imagined when you showed up on my doorstep in Seabrook." Julian nodded, his expression thoughtful. I had no expectations that day. I just knew I needed to find you, to meet Oliver, to tell you the truth. Everything since has been unexpected, in the best possible way. It has, Elena agreed. She hesitated, then added, I never thought we could be friends again, after everything. Are we? Julian asked quietly. Friends? The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Elena turned to look at him directly, studying the face that had once been as familiar to her as her own. Time and experience had changed them both, adding depth and character that hadn't been there before. Yes, she said finally. We are. Good friends, even. Julian smiled, but there was something in his eyes. A question, perhaps, or a hope he wasn't ready to voice. I'm grateful for that, for the chance to know you again, to be part of Oliver's life, to build something new from the ashes of what I destroyed. The raw honesty in his voice touched Elena deeply. This was the Julian she had fallen in love with years ago. Thoughtful, sincere, capable of a vulnerability few ever witnessed. But he was also someone new, humbled by failure, strengthened by remorse, committed to being worthy of the second chance he'd been given. As summer faded into fall, Elena found herself looking forward to their lake house weekends with increasing anticipation. It wasn't just for Oliver's sake anymore, though his joy in having both parents together remained her primary concern. It was also for the quiet evenings on the porch after he was asleep, the early morning coffees shared in comfortable silence, the gradual rediscovery of the connection that had drawn them together in the first place. One crisp October weekend, as they walked along the lakeshore collecting colorful leaves with Oliver, Julian broached a subject they had carefully avoided. I've been thinking about the holidays, he said, helping Oliver balance on a fallen log. They'll be here before we know it. Elena nodded, already anticipating the magic of Oliver's first Christmas, with a real understanding of the holiday. I was planning to take him to see the lights at the zoo, maybe visit Santa at the department store downtown. Those sound wonderful, Julian agreed. I was actually thinking about Christmas Day itself. Last year was complicated. He referred to their first Christmas in Chicago, when they had still been establishing boundaries, resulting in a somewhat awkward division of the day between their separate homes. What did you have in mind? Elena asked. Julian hesitated, then plunged ahead. What if we spent it here, at the lake house, together? Not divided shifts, but the whole day, Christmas Eve through Christmas night. For Oliver, he added quickly, so he can have one cohesive experience rather than being shuttled between locations. The suggestion made practical sense, but Elena sensed there was more to it than logistics. Just for Oliver? She asked quietly. Julian met her gaze, something vulnerable in his expression. No, he admitted. Not just for him. For us too. Because I've missed you, Elena. Not just what we were to each other before, but who we are now. The friendship we've built. The family we're creating for Oliver. The honesty of his answer caught her off guard. They had been so careful with each other, so respectful of boundaries, that direct acknowledgement of their evolving feelings had seemed taboo. I've missed you too, Elena found herself saying, the truth of it surprising her even as the words left her mouth. The man you've become, he's someone I enjoy spending time with, someone I trust with Oliver, she hesitated, someone I care about. The admission hung between them, neither pushing for more, both recognizing the significance of what had been said. Oliver, oblivious to the moment's importance, chose that time to present them both with handfuls of red and gold leaves, breaking the tension with his infectious enthusiasm. That night, after Oliver was asleep, they sat before the fireplace, the conversation flowing easily between topics, work projects, Oliver's latest developmental milestones, books they'd recently read. It felt natural when Julian moved from his separate chair to join Elena on the sofa, natural when their hands found each other's in the space between them. I never stopped loving you, Julian said quietly, his eyes on the dancing flames. Even when I thought you had betrayed me. Even when I was consumed by anger and hurt. I tried to, but I couldn't. Elena's breath caught at the unexpected confession. "Julian, you don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I'm not asking for declarations or promises. I just wanted you to know that what I feel for you now isn't new. It's the same love, tempered by regret, strengthened by respect for the amazing woman and mother you've become." Elena studied their intertwined fingers, feeling the steady warmth of his hand around hers. "I don't know if I can go back," she said honestly, "to what we were before." "I'm not asking you to go back," Julian replied. "I'm asking if we might go forward, together, at whatever pace feels right, with Oliver always as our priority." The proposition was both terrifying and exhilarating. To open herself to Julian again, to risk the heart she had so carefully protected, it wasn't a decision to make lightly. "I need time," she said finally, "to be sure, for Oliver's sake as much as my own." Julian nodded, accepting her caution without resentment. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." The promise, an echo of what he had said in Seabrook over a year ago, carried a different weight now. Then, it had felt like a warning, a reminder of his determination. Now, it felt like security, a foundation upon which something new might be built. Christmas at the lake house was everything they had hoped for. The small cabin was transformed with twinkling lights, pine garlands, and a tree that nearly touched the ceiling, decorated with a mixture of elegant ornaments Julian had brought and handmade creations Elena and Oliver had crafted together. Oliver's delight on Christmas morning, his wonder at the snow-covered landscape outside, his joy in having both parents share in his excitement. These moments crystallized for Elena what had been gradually becoming clear over the past months. They were a family, not in the traditional sense perhaps, but in all the ways that truly mattered. As Oliver napped that afternoon, exhausted from the morning's festivities, Elena and Julian sat together on the porch swing, bundled against the cold, watching the snow fall gently over the frozen lake. "Thank you for this," Elena said, leaning slightly against Julian's shoulder, "for creating this space where we can be a family for Oliver." Julian's arm slipped around her, a gesture that felt both new and familiar. "Thank you for allowing it, for giving me the chance to be part of his life. Part of yours." Elena turned to look at him, seeing in his eyes the same emotion that had been growing in her own heart. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "Ready," Julian repeated, his expression cautiously hopeful. "To go forward," Elena clarified. "Together, to see where this path leads us." The joy that bloomed across Julian's face was answer enough, but his words, whispered against her hair as he pulled her close, sealed the promise between them. "Wherever it leads, we'll walk it together, one step at a time." Their first kiss in nearly 2 years was gentle, tentative, a beginning rather than a reclaiming. It held none of the desperate passion of their early relationship, but something deeper, more enduring. The knowledge of what could be lost, the commitment to protecting what had been found. The months that followed brought a gradual merging of their separate lives. Weeknight dinners at Elena's apartment became a regular occurrence. Julian's penthouse, once a sleek showcase of his success, was transformed with Oliver's toys, Elena's design touches, family photographs that captured their evolving story. By the following summer, they had established a new normal, a relationship built on the solid foundation of co-parenting, strengthened by the mutual respect they had developed during their time apart, deepened by the love that had never truly died but had instead matured into something more resilient. It was during their annual 4th of July weekend at the lake house, as fireworks bloomed over the water and Oliver slept peacefully inside, that Julian took Elena's hand on the darkened dock. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous energy she could feel in his touch. Elena turned to him, already suspecting what was coming. "Julian," he smiled, reading her expression in the dim light. "Don't worry, I'm not repeating the past. This isn't about reclaiming what we lost. It's about acknowledging what we've found." From his pocket, he withdrew not a velvet box but a simple wooden one, hand-carved with intricate patterns. "I made this," he explained, "during those months in Seabrook when I was trying to prove I could be more than the man who hurt you. When I was learning patience and humility. Elena took the box, touched by the revelation of this hidden talent. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, lay a ring unlike any she had seen before. A band of intertwined silver and gold, set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. "It's not the showpiece I gave you before," Julian said quietly. "That ring was about my pride, my ability to give you the biggest, the best. This one is about us, the silver and gold woven together, stronger for having been forged separately. The pearl for Oliver, our greatest treasure. The diamonds for the moments of light we found even in darkness." Tears filled Elena's eyes as she understood the thought, the meaning behind each element. This wasn't a grand gesture designed to impress. It was a deeply personal symbol of their journey. "Elena Vance," Julian continued, his voice steady with conviction. "I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm asking you to build a future with me. One day at a time, with eyes wide open and hearts fully committed. Will you marry me? Not because it erases what happened, but because we've created something new and precious from the ashes of what was lost." Elena looked from the ring to the man before her, the man who had once broken her heart with his distrust, who had threatened to take her child, who had then spent 2 years proving through consistent action that he had truly changed. The man who had become not just Oliver's devoted father, but her trusted partner, her closest friend, her strongest supporter. "Yes," she said simply, "not because I've forgotten, but because I've forgiven. Because the man you are now is someone I want to build a life with. Someone I trust with my heart and our son's future." As Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, the fireworks above reflected in the water below, creating a moment of perfect symmetry. Light above and below, past and future, endings and beginnings all converging in a single point of time. Their wedding the following spring was nothing like the lavish affair they had once planned in New York. Held at the lake house with only their closest friends and family in attendance, it was a celebration not of wealth or status but of resilience, forgiveness, and the family they had created against all odds. Oliver, now 3.5, took his role as ring-bearer with solemn importance, carefully carrying the wooden box Julian had carved to the simple arbor where his parents waited. Maggie, who had traveled from Seabrook to stand as Elena's maid of honor, wiped away tears as the couple exchanged vows they had written themselves, honest acknowledgments of their difficult journey, hopeful promises for the path ahead. "I vow to remember that trust is earned daily," Julian said, his voice carrying across the gathered guests to the lake beyond. "To listen before I judge, to seek understanding before conclusion. To be the husband and father you both deserve, present, patient, and unwavering in my commitment to our family." Elena's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to embrace the future without being chained to the past. To trust not blindly but wisely, based on actions rather than words. To build with you a home where forgiveness and growth are valued above perfection. Where Oliver learns that love is not about never making mistakes, but about how we recover from them." As they sealed their promises with a kiss, Oliver clapping delightedly between them, Elena felt the final pieces of her heart's protective armor fall away. The journey from that rainy night in New York to this sun-dappled day by the lake had been long and painful, marked by betrayal and fear, but also by courage, truth, and ultimately, love. Julian Sterling had once threatened to take everything from her. Instead, he had given her something far more valuable than security or status. He had given her the gift of genuine partnership, of a love tested by fire and found unbreakable. As they turned to face their guests, hands joined with Oliver's between them, Elena knew with absolute certainty that they had created something rare and precious. A family built not on perfect beginnings but on the strength to overcome, the courage to forgive, and the wisdom to recognize that sometimes, the most beautiful stories arise from the ashes of what once seemed lost forever. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more timeless love tales with Mr. Harrison. What story would you like to hear next?